Welcome. Do you want to know if global warming is real? Well, the simple thing to do is just ask a tree. The thing about trees is they have no bias, political, financial, or religious. They don't belong to political parties. They do not accept government grants, nor can be given government grants. They're not any part of any scientific consensus. They're not part of any grassroots conspiracy theory. They are not swayed by any financial or religious bias, and their bark is certainly worse than their bite. So the question is what trees to ask, and the obvious one for people in our area is the tidal basin in Washington, D.C. There are nearly 4,000 Yoshino cherry trees along a 2-mile trail around a 100-acre lake. That lake is brackish water, and at the moment the blossoms have just peaked. The trees were originally donated by Japan in 1912, so they've been there for over 100 years. This year is the 110th year of the Cherry Blossom Festival, and the peak of the blossom was on the 23rd of March. That's nearly a week earlier than it was when I was here in the 1980s. But you don't have to take my word for it. The date of the peak blossom is kept by the National Park Service, and here is a graph of those dates going back to 1921, and you can see there's a general slow decline in the dates of the peak blossom, and it's actually 4 days earlier than it was 100 years ago on average. This is not just happening in Washington, D.C., it's happening all over the world. In Kyoto, Japan, it's nearly 10 days earlier. If you look for nearly 800 years, the cherry blossoms were, on average, blossoming about the 14th of April, plus or minus 4 days. Look what's happened in the last 50 years. The date has moved a lot earlier. It's now 10 days earlier than it was on average over that 800-year period. We don't really need to rely on just cherry trees. We can look across the whole country. Here I'm looking at the tree leafing out date in all the national parks around the country, and you can see they are generally earlier, sometimes as much as 25 days. You can do the same chart for the blossoming of those trees, and you can see that this is up to 10 to 15 days earlier on average across the country. So something is going on, and the trees are trying to tell us this. Perhaps you wonder about sea level rise. Well, the cherry blossoms can tell us another story there. This is the tidal basin, which is now regularly flooded at high tides. The problem is the brackish water in the basin is getting to the roots of the trees, and those trees are beginning to die. So after 110 years of being perfectly happy where they are, they're beginning to suffer from the effects of the rising level of the water in the tidal basin, which is determined by the rising level of the Atlantic Ocean. So what can the trees conclude from all of this? The planet is warming, and so spring temperatures are coming earlier each year. That's getting them out of phase with the insects and bird migrations that depend on those trees, which is a problem for both the trees and the animals concerned. We can also conclude that sea levels are rising. But what are the trees telling us? They're trying to tell us we are killing them, and they're asking us to please stop it. With that sad message, that's it for today. Please stay safe, and until next time, goodbye.